everyone, and welcome back to 20 Days of Healing. My name is Vicky Poole, and this week we're talking around green commitment. And I'm absolutely stoked today to have Tracey Rawling Church with us. Hey Tracey, how you doing?
Hi Vicky, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thanks. So Tracey's our sustainability consultant, and I came across Tracey when we were working together on the same board of a charity called Connect Reading. And as I got to know more and more about Tracey and what she's passionate about, you know, Tracey's got so many different hats, and I just knew that for this week we had to bring Tracey along to talk around sustainability, climate change, and what you can do as an individual to make a real difference to the world. So Tracey, I know that I know you, but for everyone who's watching this on replay, what do you want to say about yourself?
Oh, crikey, where do I start? So you're right, I'm passionate about sustainability. It's my job. I do it 4 days a week for money as a sustainability consultant, and I save 20% of my working time for pro bono projects. So that's working on the board with you at Connect Reading, and also being co-chair of the Reading Climate Change Partnership. So we've just written the climate emergency strategy and action plan for our town. And then in my spare time, I run a little side gig called Eco Beagle, which sells plastic-free and palm oil-free household products.
Yeah, fantastic. And I have to admit, not that this is a plug anybody, but I've used Eco Beagle and I have found it awesome. So check it out online. I'll also pop a link to Eco Beagle in the comment section. It saves you hunting around everything as well, so it's all in one place. So Tracey, I suppose the real kickoff for today is really talking around about sustainability, and lockdowns had a huge impact to a lot of people, and people are now looking to make their own bread, to make their own soda bread. That was a huge thing, and you know, they're really looking to do more at home. But I suppose from a sustainability perspective, what can you do to be more sustainable?
So I think the first thing to say is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think that we all tend to suffer from a load of eco guilt, and we all feel that if we're not going to do it absolutely perfectly, then what's the point? And I really think that everybody can do something, and the key thing is literally just to start from where you are. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you haven't done it before. It doesn't matter whether you've been doing it for a while and you're not sure what the next step is. You know, just work it out as you go along, find some useful blogs and websites and follow the guidance and do something. I think my top tips would be probably think about your energy. So one of the best things you can do is change to a green energy supplier so that the energy that you consume in your home is powered by renewables. Minimizing your energy consumption is really important too, but why not just move to a green tariff? There are some really, really good green tariffs that are no more expensive than standard brown grid energy, and there's no reason not to switch. Well done, you have.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow there, Tracey. So if I was to go online and go like compare the market or any other comparison website and look for a green deal, how do I know that that green deal is green, and how will I know that what I'm going for is the best one?
So there are various comparison websites. The one that I tend to recommend is the Citizens Advice one, because it has the broadest range of energy suppliers on it, and they've done the due diligence. So if you tick the green energy button in your comparison engine, then they will only show you the green tariffs. So it's you know, it's easy to find them. Green electricity is relatively easy. Green gas isn't really a thing. I mean, there are some companies that supply some kind of biogas, but really there's not much that can be done about gas. Focus on your electricity and switch that over to a green tariff would be my first tip. Then my second tip would be to, and this is quite a controversial one, so I'm sorry, think about what you eat. So I think a lot of us know now that plant-based diets are far better for the climate than eating lots of meat. I'm not saying everyone has to become a vegan. I just don't believe that that's the way that this needs to be done. But being mindful about how much meat you eat, and also think about the provenance of the meat that you eat. There was a brilliant TV program that I can highly recommend, which was called, I think, Feast to Save the Planet or something like that.
Something
We'll find the link and circulate it afterwards. It was really, really informative. They opened a kind of pop-up restaurant where all the choices on the menu had been carbon footprinted, and it was really, really enlightening. So plant-based is good, but local and seasonal is best. So if you're flying in avocados from South America, you might just as well be eating meat. But then if you're eating a steak, if it was a grass-fed cow from England, then that's going to have a much lower impact than fancy Argentinian beef. So, you know, thinking about not just what you're eating, but also when you're eating and where it came from. So the more local and seasonal you can eat, the better welfare your meat is, the better. And why not think about meat as more of a luxury item rather than something that you eat every day? And then the third thing I would say is focus on your single-use items. So there's loads and loads of focus on single-use plastics currently, and there have been great work done by, you know, TV programs really drawing attention to the issue, starting with David Attenborough and the Blue Planet Effect, and then Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall and his war on plastics. And a lot of people focus on plastics, but then they substitute single-use plastics with single-use something else. And actually just single use is bad altogether, really, because the energy that's used in manufacturing it is never really repaid if you only use a thing once. So just thinking about maybe buying things that are designed to be reused, and then keeping and reusing the things that you have before you go out and buy a new one. And then, you know, a washable fabric bag is always going to be better than a single-use plastic or even paper or compostable bag. So those kind of choices can really make a difference too.
And I hear that piece there. So I just want to really go back to that, the reusable and the single use. There are so many different variants now of what you can get. And I was absolutely amazed that I could find a multi-use or reusable greaseproof paper.
Yeah.
And it came in a really big roll, and I just cut it to the relevant size. So one roll has now managed to service my entire family, and it's guaranteed for like 3 years. You know, so that's amazing. And I can only imagine the amount of paper that we'd be saving, because we're all big bakers.
Yeah, there are some really, really useful innovations like that, and these things like the reusable silicone bags, for example. I mean, I've had some of those for several years. So, you know, if you want to stick something in your freezer, you don't need one of those plastic bags that you throw away. You can buy a bag that can be washed and reused. And it's a little bit of extra work, you know, washing it up when you've finished your dinner. But honestly, it's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it soon becomes a habit and you don't really notice.
I hear that. Cool. And I wonder if someone's starting out, I mean, you'd said earlier about, you know, not letting perfect being the enemy of good. If you're starting out and you don't know what a plastic-free alternative is to, you know, disposable cutlery, where are you going to go to find some alternatives?
There are some really great people, actually mostly women, doing fantastic work on just sharing knowledge and expertise. So there's a great woman called Jen Gale who has created a webpage called Sustainable-ish, and she's also written a brilliant book which is basically you know, how to start guide on being sustainable. And it's very much written with, you know, the busy family in mind, and the people who you know, have a million things to think about and just need some easy answers. So she's really, really good. And there are some great communities on social media as well. So there's one called the Lazy Environmentalists, which again is very much geared around really easy things that you can do. But also, if anybody's got a question, it's a really non-judgmental place to ask it. And I think there's nothing worse than, you know, joining a community and then finding that the first time you ask a question that isn't, you know, kind of shows up a little bit that you don't know completely what the answer is, everybody piles on you and starts criticizing you for not doing the next thing up. Well, let's just support people for doing the first step and be positive about it, and then we can move on from there.
Awesome. I think it's actually interesting to kind of point out at this point that you can get sustainable products for pretty much anything. So it can be kitchenware to, you know, cleaning products, all the way through to menstrual care. So there is sustainable options in there for
there
anybody.
absolutely are. If you look for them. And also sometimes they're not, it's the sustainable answer isn't even a thing as such. So, let me explain to you what I mean. So, you know, we use cling film, for example, to cover a dish in the fridge. You know, you put some leftovers in the fridge and you want to cover it. Well, you don't need cling film, you don't need foil. Sit a plate on it. You know, there are improvisations using things you've already got that we've just kind of forgotten about. I mean, when I was a kid, that's how my mum saved everything in the fridge. And then all of a sudden somebody invented cling film and that became the default. So, you know, there are some kind of little prompts from our childhood, I think, that we can perhaps go back to as well.
That's one. So ask your mum and ask your grandma what they would do.
Completely. Yeah. Awesome. Trust your grandma. She knows.
I think that should be a slogan for pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So then we've covered really what we can do at home and what we can do there to make a difference. And I know that you work as a sustainability consultant. Who are the kinds of people that you're helping there? And what are the big trends that companies are now looking to implement?
So I'm mostly working with larger companies and public sector organisations, so this won't be relevant for everybody, but at the moment there's a really, really strong focus on net zero. So the big goal is to align with the Paris Climate Agreement. We need net zero by 2050. And that means that by 2050, the amount of carbon that we emit needs to be balanced by at least an equivalent amount of carbon that we're storing. And that could be in things like biodiversity, trees, for example, for carbon sequestration. So a lot of bigger organisations are now looking at adopting science-based targets. So they're looking at the maths around the Paris Agreement, what their share of those carbon emissions are to get to net zero as a planet, and then committing to those targets. And some of them are going beyond and looking for carbon positive. So they want to not just become carbon neutral, but they actually want to be compensating for more carbon than they're emitting. And so that's the big push at the moment among larger organisations and the real kind of leaders in industry. And a lot of that is being promoted up to COP26. So Alok Sharma, who happens to be our local MP and is also the president of COP26, is really pushing membership of this programme called Race to Zero, where big organisations, governments, NGOs, you know, whatever, any kind of organisation can sign up to adopt a net zero target. But again, there's this thing about the perfect being the enemy of the good, because if you're a business just starting out on your sustainability journey, and particularly if you're a small business, you're not going to be signing up to a net zero target straight away. That's just not a realistic thing to happen. So again, it's about breaking it down into the things that you can do. And I think particularly for office-based businesses, COVID has actually created an opportunity, I suppose, to think about whether we return to business as usual. Because, you know, those of us who are used to working in offices and going in every day to the office, either, you know, driving or catching the bus or whatever, to our office, working there all day, commuting home again, and you know, that being just the accepted norm. Obviously, we haven't been able to do that during the pandemic. A lot of us have got used to working at home, and I really am just talking about office-based jobs now. And we've had to learn new ways of working. And like you and I are now, we're all doing Zoom all the time. We haven't got access to a printer or a copier, perhaps, so we're not using as much paper. You know, we're not going out to the coffee shop to buy our coffee in a disposable cup, because we're just popping along to our own kitchen and making one in a china mug. And so I think there's a real danger that we're going to get a rebound effect after coronavirus, and we're all just going to return to our office jobs and we're going to do what we've always done. And actually, we've learnt some carbon saving behaviours during the pandemic that we could retain when life gets back to normal. And I think that probably the best thing any business can do right now is think about what pandemic adaptations have been climate beneficial and can we hang on to them rather than just bouncing back to doing things the way we always used to? And I'm not saying that no one should ever meet face to face for business anymore, because there's a real benefit to sitting across the table from somebody in the same room, or, you know, bumping into them at the coffee point in the middle of a conference. You sometimes have your most important conversations there. But we just need to get away from the point of view that that is what we always do. Again, it's all about moderation. So, you know, you do need to go and meet your client face to face every now and again, but maybe 3 out of 4 times or 2 out of 3 times, you can still have that conversation over Zoom or Teams, even when we're allowed to meet in person. And that will have massive carbon benefits. And also, I have to say, although we're both on camera now, and clearly it makes sense for a broadcast like this, if you can also turn off your camera once you've done your hellos and your pleasantries in your video conferences, because that will reduce the carbon footprint of that meeting by 95%.
Really?
Yeah, using video is massively carbon intensive compared to just an online call. So again, it's nice to see somebody's face when you're saying hello to them, but once you start sharing your documents or just, you know, talking in the details, turn your camera off. It will save energy.
That's a huge tip. Wow, that's fantastic. Cool. Now, a lot of what we talked there about what happens at businesses and the changes that businesses have made during lockdown, and not every business is going to go back to working in an office. And does that then not shift the responsibility for their effort to be carbon zero to the people at home who are working from home? Which then asks the question, do we as an individual not also have a responsibility to be net zero?
Responsibility is a big word, isn't it? And again, I think, you know, there's always this danger that we put so much pressure on people to reduce their environmental impact that it becomes a threatening thing that we feel, you know, that gives us a fight or flight reflex. And I think, you know, leaning into it is probably much more beneficial. There is an issue about carbon emissions being transferred from the workplace to the home through working from home. And once you actually get into properly looking at your carbon emissions as a business, and sorry, jargon, there are 3 categories of carbon emissions. So there are scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 carbon emissions. Most businesses pay attention mostly to their scope 1 and their scope 2. So scope 1 is fossil fuels that are burnt on site. So for example, if you're using gas for your heating, that would be a scope 1 because you're burning it there and then. Scope 2 is energy consumed from outside sources. So your electricity would be scope 2 because the fossil fuels are not being consumed on the premises, but you're consuming the energy that was produced with them. Scope 3 are all those other emissions that are to do with things that are outside your direct control as a business. So that would be, for example, your employees' commuting emissions, your business travel emissions, the carbon emissions of all the partners in your supply chain. So the people who supply you with either the products that you resell or the goods and services that you consume in the course of your business. And actually, if your staff are working at home, then their home energy use becomes your scope 3 emission. So it becomes your responsibility. And this is one of the advantages of the net zero science-based targets model, is that's within the model. So you're paying attention to those scope 3 emissions that are not in your premises, but you're still responsible for as a business. So there is a methodology for that. And obviously, you know, as companies continue their carbon journey, then that's something that does kind of get mopped up along the way.
Fantastic. And, you know, we are both climate activists, and, you know, I see my ability to respond is my action to be responsible for what I'm doing. And there are lots of eco-environmentalists and eco-warriors around by me who take an active effort into planting trees, into cleaning up the wildlife and you know, litter picking. And there's lots of different things that they can do in there to help not just themselves, but their area to become more, well, to get a lower result on the carbon neutral basis. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, the last thing that I'd like to very quickly touch on, I know that we're running a bit short on time, is the climate change action plan for Reading. So Reading is Britain's largest town.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of similarities between what Reading is in terms of small cities or other large towns. And I'm wondering if you can share any tidbits on what's come out of that action plan, something that people can maybe join in at home so that they can help in a grander scale.
Yeah, so actually what we've tried to do is make it really easy for people to join in. So when we launched the Climate Emergency Action Plan last November, one thing we did was we held a climate festival for a week. So there was a week-long program of online events where people could learn about how to get grants for solar panels, what it was like to drive an EV, how to work out the carbon impact of their diet. So loads and loads of practical information that people could take away and use, and those events were mostly videoed and are being saved and will be shared as kind of legacy content. But the other thing that we did was we created a website, which is at www.readingcan.org.uk, and there's a huge section on there called What Can I Do? And in the What Can I Do section, it's divided by topics like using energy or traveling or eating and drinking. And then for business, we've got equivalent categories too. And there's just loads and loads of tips and information. First of all, about the things that you can do and why you should be doing them and what kind of impact they'll have. And then there are loads and loads of links to really useful resources. So, there are great sites on, how to make a menu out of your leftovers, where you can type in, the 3 things you've got in your fridge and it'll come up with a recipe that you can make with them. Information on how to join, toy clubs or, so many different things. And I think the great thing about that is that it's important that we meet people where they are. So everybody's at a different point in the journey and everybody's focused on a slightly different impact. Some people are more concerned about plastics, other about foods, other about, walking and doing away with the car. And so what we've tried to do is bring everything all together in one place, but just to organize it so you can easily find what you're looking for. And then it's all about easy actions and giving people the information that they need to be able to work out whether that's the right thing for them to do and where they can go to find out more about it.
Sounds as though that's going to be the place where everyone's going to be hitting in a few weeks' time.
Well, we hope so.
That's fantastic, Tracey. Thank you very much. And I'm wondering, we've talked around a lot today, and I'm wondering if you were to have one golden nugget for anyone who's watching this, what would you say to them to help them on their sustainability journey?
I would say you do make a difference. I think it's really easy to think, well, I'm just one person and, my little contribution is really not going to do very much in the grand scheme of things. But one of my favorite quotes is, if you think you're too small to make a difference, you've never been to bed with a mosquito. And it doesn't, I think it's important not to think of this as a great big hairy problem that nobody really has the power to solve. Actually, if enough people do a little bit each, we begin to make a difference, and then that gives us the energy to do the next bit and the next bit, and the whole thing takes on a life of its own. And if you just look at what one single person, Greta Thunberg, has achieved just by sitting outside the Parliament building every Friday instead of going to school, it just takes one person to care and to gather a few people around them who are like-minded, and we can achieve so much. So I really would say, just think about what difference you can make. Don't worry so much about everybody else. Do what you can do, and that, you'll feel good about it, and it will inspire you to do more.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm definitely feeling inspired now. I'm going to go downstairs and have a look and see what plastic I've got in the house and see what I can do to rid myself of that next. That's brilliant. Thank you, Tracey. And thank you to everyone who's... Sorry, Tracey. Thank you for everyone.
My pleasure. That went really well, didn't it? I'm going to shut up now and leave you to finish.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you very much for everyone who's watching on replay. My name's Vicky Poole. If you like what you see and you want to see more of the videos that are coming out, you can click the subscribe button below. You can follow myself at Vicky Poole Coach on Twitter and Instagram, and you can join my Facebook group, Flourishing Together. Although for this section, you might find it more interesting to join Sustainable Burfield, which is the sustainability site that I run on Facebook. And you can find Tracy just by typing in her name into Google. You'll come up with any number of links about Tracy and how awesome that she is. And you can also find her on her sustainable website, EcoBeagle. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Take care and God bless. Bye now.